Can machines be creative? How long could it be until a machine composes a symphony? What even is creativity? Well, hello and welcome to the Cheeky Science Show, where in this video we're going to be talking about the book The Creativity Code, how AI is learning to write, paint and think. So this book is written by Marcus du Sautoy, a British mathematician and, as evident from this book, also an author. So I really enjoyed reading this book, and so there's a lot to cover, and so I'll mainly talk about the key take-home messages that I got from reading the book and some of the enjoyable parts that I think you'll find entertaining. And honestly, I don't know why it took me so long to have to read a book about creativity. Like, why wasn't I learnt this at school? Because as we'll find out, creativity is so fundamental to being a human. The book has definitely inspired me and enabled me to embrace the creativity that I possess. So we'll begin by addressing the big question, which is, what actually is creativity? And then we'll go into the different chapters of this book and look how artificial intelligence is being used in art, in maths, in music, and also in languages. So there's lots of different cool things to talk about in this video. So yeah, as always, hope you enjoy it. So let's get going. So firstly, why is Marcus, a mathematician, taking us on this journey into creativity and its overlap with artificial intelligence? Well, artificial intelligence and machine learning are based on algorithms and codes and are all mathematical at heart. So in fact, Marcus is a very good person to take us on this journey. And the book begins with Ada Lovelace, another English mathematician who believed machines were limited and that you couldn't get more out than you put in. So the rest of the book explores whether Ada Lovelace can be proved wrong, but what about creativity? As humans, we have the ability to create works of art that elevate, expand, and transform what it means to be human. These are the outpourings that Marcus describes as the human codes. If a machine was going to be creative, it would need an extra step. The contribution should be more than just an expression of the coder's creativity, or that of a person who built the dataset. So what actually is creativity? Well, there are three key components. It has to be something new, surprising, and that has value. Well, that's easy to say, but how easy is it to actually create creativity? Well, Margaret Bowden, a research professor of cognitive science in the Department of Informatics at the University of Sussex, who works on the fields of artificial intelligence, psychology, and cognitive and computer science, has identified three different types of human creativity. These are exploratory, combination, and transformational. So what is exploratory creativity? Well, Margaret describes it as taking what is already there and exploring its outer edges, extending the limits of what is possible while remaining bound by the rules. And this is thought to account for around 97% of human creativity. Combination creativity, on the other hand, is how an artist might take two completely different constructs and seek to combine them together to create something new. But it is transformational creativity that is more mysterious and elusive. It's those rare moments that are complete game changers, such as Picasso and Cubism. You might start by dropping constraints and see what emerges. The creative act is to choose what to drop or what fresh constraint to add, such that you end up with a new thing of value. So this idea of having to drop constraints is kind of summarized very well by what Picasso said: the chief enemy of creativity is good sense. So can you program a machine to behave irrationally? And can creativity be taught? Well, there's another element to creativity that we've not yet spoken about, and that's history. And historical context plays a very important part in allowing us to define something as creative, because creativity is not an absolute measure, but a relative activity. And so this includes acts of personal creativity that may be novel to us, but historically old news. It's like me making a risotto and realising that actually someone made it, I don't know how long ago risotto. I don't know why did I pick risotto? Terrible example. Anyway, this was also something that Margaret Bowden spoke about, and the idea that you have this psychological and historical creativity. And so historical creativity is emerged from encouraging psychological creativity, which are these acts of personal creativity. But if we must go back to my risotto example, there is one important ingredient that I need to be able to foster creativity, and that is to embrace failure. Is this something that we can train machines to do? Well, we'll come back to that near the end of the video, but to begin with, let's meet Demis Hassabis. So Demis was a child prodigy in chess, and before he even went to the University of Cambridge for his undergraduate degree, he began designing computer games at Bullfrog Productions and even co-designed the game Theme Park, which I definitely remember playing as a kid. Not that I was any good at it, but that's just incredible. Anyway, whilst at Cambridge, he learnt about the artificial intelligence revolution and became interested in what you can get machines to do. In particular, he was interested in the game Go, a strategy board game invented in China whereby the aim is to surround more territory than the opponent. Now, I've never actually played Go, but it is very complex compared to chess. And so it was Hassabis' idea that rather than trying to write a program himself that could play Go, he would write a meta program that would be responsible for writing the program that would play Go. The idea is that by getting a machine to play lots of games of Go, it would be able to learn from its mistakes and improve its playing capacity, and therefore improve its chances of winning. And learning from mistakes is effectively what we do. A newborn baby does not have a brain that is pre-programmed to cope with making its way through life. It is programmed instead to learn as it interacts with its environment. So Hassabis wanted to know how the brain works. Therefore, he decided to do a PhD in neuroscience at the University College London. With discussions made during this time of his PhD with a fellow neuroscientist and a childhood friend, in September 2010 was the development of DeepMind, a company that you probably now know as being a Google-owned company. But the thing is, DeepMind needed money, and pitching on a platform that they were going to play games and solve intelligence didn't sound that serious, but initially they did get funding from Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. Now, before going straight to Go, they tried their different algorithms and methods at a more simpler game, Breakout. The aim of this game is to knock down all of the different boxes, and one of the most effective strategies is to dig a tunnel, but that's something that you kind of learn after playing multiple games, and using this reinforcement learning approach in this algorithm that they generated, the machine was able to learn it incredibly fast. Now, the next challenge was Go. The program that DeepMind eventually created was AlphaGo, and they used AlphaGo to compete against world champion Lee Sedol in a competition that was set up in March 2016. Before the match started, Lee Sedol had this to say: "I have heard that DeepMind's AI is surprisingly strong and getting stronger, but I am confident that I can win, at least this time." And so this actually weirdly reminded me of the Omnidroid in Incredibles, that when Mr. Incredible beats it the first time, it learns from its previous mistakes and comes back bigger and stronger. Despite his words of confidence, out of 5 matches, the final score was 4 to AlphaGo, 1 to Lee. But the most remarkable take-home from these matches was move 32 of Game 2, which was a move by AlphaGo that has been deemed a truly creative act, an exploratory form of creativity, because this move broke the previous regards of how to play Go, and now that they've seen this new method, it's revolutionized how people play the game to win, and it kind of demonstrates how artificial intelligence is a tool for exploring deeper, further, wider than before. It is not meant to replace human creativity, but to augment it. But why would you now want to aspire to be the world champion at Go if you're going to be beaten by a machine? Now, before we go any further, we need to talk about algorithms, because algorithms are key to artificial intelligence. Now, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a biochemist, so don't worry, we'll keep this relatively simple, but it's a powerful reminder that our lives are becoming increasingly pushed around by algorithms, that it's just so important to try and understand how they work and what they are doing, because otherwise we might be getting shafted. So, I've chosen 2 fun examples that I quite enjoyed from the book. The first one is the Google algorithm, because who are the magic Google elves scouring the internet every time we make a search? Well, that isn't quite the case, as we know, although Ben's Nan didn't quite know that. Look into that tweet if you want more details. The point is, how do you come up with an unbiased measure of an importance of a website such that the website most related to the question comes up first in the search list? Now, one way to do this would be to look at connectivity between different websites and how they interact with each other, as a website regarded with more links is more likely to be trustworthy or more highly ranked. And so a mathematical tool that can be used to look at this distribution are matrices, and you can develop matrices of redistribution. But the precise parameters in this algorithm are actually kept secret and change over time. But the most remarkable thing is how robust this algorithm actually is. But it isn't immune to clever attackers. And for a short period of time in the summer of 2018, if you Googled idiot, the first image that appeared was that of Donald Trump. So I actually tried this out just the other day, and you still get Donald Trump as the first image. Another commonly used algorithm can be described by what David Gale and Lloyd Shapley described as the stable marriage problem. And this was the problem as to how to pair up 4 heterosexual men with women and to match them up such that they have stable marriages. That means there shouldn't be a man or a woman who would prefer to be with one another than the partner that they actually got. In the example used in the book, we had the 4 kings and the 4 queens found in a pack of cards, and they were tried to be paired up based on their own preferences as to who they wanted to get married to. But the interesting thing with this algorithm is that there's an interesting asymmetry. So in the example given, the queens proposed to the kings, which meant that the queens got their preferred ranking over the kings, because you actually end up with a different stable pairing if the kings propose to the queens. And so this has important implications because this algorithm can be used in a variety of different situations, one of which was used in medical students in America looking for residences. And the algorithm that was being used previously was such that the hospitals were doing the proposing. This meant that the students were getting the worst deal. Fortunately, this has now been reversed so that the students are effectively doing the proposing for the residences that they want. And so this goes back to the point that it's so important to really understand how these algorithms are working. But common to any algorithm is the requirement for training data that enables the machine to learn from what's already available and to improve its algorithm to then apply it to new data. And so this idea is that we need data, but we live in the day and age now that the amount of data produced in 2 days is equivalent to the same amount of data it took us from the dawn of civilization into 2003 to generate. And so data is now regarded as the new oil, which is why, companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Amazon are sitting pretty. We are pretty much giving them our service for free. Well, not entirely free because we use their services, but many people are not aware of these transactions and give up valuable data for little in return. Now, in the interest of time, I've skipped over the chapter talking about advances in computer vision and further algorithmic evolution, but if you are interested in that, let me know and I can probably make a separate video just talking about that. But anyway, now we're going to move on to whether or not machine learning can be creative in terms of learning how to paint. To introduce this chapter, Marcus begins with the painting work 4,900 Farben by Gerhard Richter, which is a painting composed of 5x5 grid of squares that have 25 different colours. And effectively, by combining these different squares and different patterns, there are 25 to the power of 25 different paintings that could be generated. And the question is, why is this regarded as art and not a book of Dulux colour samples? Well, this brings us to the question of what actually is art, and it seems less about the aesthetic and skill and more about the interesting message and perspective that the artist is revealing about our relationship to our world. Well, this seems like a very human ability, so can we ever regard artwork generated by AI as art? And would you feel duped if you cried at a piece of art if you were later told that it was computer generated? Now, these are kind of questions that there are yet no distinct and clear answers to them, but there have definitely been advances in terms of getting creative artworks from machines. And one effective algorithm that has been used so far come under the umbrella of general adversarial networks. And this is when you have kind of like two algorithms, one of which is tasked with disrupting known styles of art and trying to create something novel, and the second one is tasked with identifying the output as either recognizably art, which means that it's not something novel, or just insufficiently original. So you have a generator and a discriminator. And the aim is to create things that fall into the sweet spot on the Wundt curve. And so this is a graph that shows that by increasing novelty, initially you see an increase in the y-axis, which means that the effect is pleasant, until eventually it goes negative and it becomes unpleasant because it's too novel. So Ahmed El-Gamel used a derivative of this network, which he terms creative adversarial networks, whereby they generated art by learning about styles and deviating from style norms. The work that he created using his machine was then presented at an art exhibition. And so this was shown at Art Basel in 2016. And so you can see some of the images here. Some of them actually look pretty impressive, and some of them look a little bit terrifying. Anyway, what was most interesting is that some of the viewers found the art more inspiring and identified more closely with them than some of the other artwork present generated by humans. But I think one of the most interesting things to come out from this book is appreciating how we can potentially use the art produced by artificial intelligence to try and further understand the underlying algorithm and how it's working. So what do I mean by this? Well, a company called Deep Dream, that is a team at Google, have effectively developed an inverted algorithm by giving the algorithm a pixelated image and asking the algorithm to dial up and enhance features it thought would trigger the actual recognition of an identifiable feature. They could have an insight into the visual recognition algorithms that the algorithm is using. Turns out I struggle to say algorithm. Anyway, to Marcus, this is what art is all about, trying to understand the world through a different set of eyes and to connect with a different way of seeing. Analogy would be why sometimes we see faces in a piece of toast or animals in clouds. And so what Marcus explains is that the human brain has evolved sensitivity to images of animals since it was key to our survival. But what about machine learning? Well, what Deep Dream uncovered is that apparently starfish and ants seem to appear out of nowhere. But more interestingly, it did show how the algorithm had learned. For example, images of dumbbells would always have an arm attached to the dumbbell. And so it seemed that the way that the algorithm had learned was from images of people lifting weights. However, sometimes it was hard to name what the algorithm was actually distinguishing in the image. And what Deep Dream say is that this is more like penetrating the deep unconscious of the algorithm, and the Google programmers call this process inceptionism, and consider the images to be like the dreams of the algorithm. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, our inability to understand how algorithms works is actually what's kind of fueling the movies and kind of terrifying stories about algorithmic apocalypse. But maybe by using these art forms, it could be an insight into how these algorithms are learning. But art is just one art form. What about music? Now, to quote Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, music is the pleasure the human mind experiences from counting without being aware that it is counting. And as a musician, I can relate to this quote. But anyway, it emphasizes how actually music is very much an algorithmic process. And so it kind of suggests that artificial intelligence would be very good at generating bits of music. But are these bits of music, worth listening to, or are they just, not very inventive? Because sure, music has mathematical elements, but that doesn't necessarily involve the emotional connection that comes between an artist and a listener. And so the example that I found most interesting that Marcus talks about is about quantum composing. And this is the idea of generating personalized music using data from smartphones. And so what quantum composing kind of refers to is about splitting up a piece of music and kind of rearranging it in a way that best suits the listener. And so you end up with a song that exists in many different states, like how in quantum physics, electrons can be in many places at the same time due to quantum superposition. And so this approach was used by the band Massive Attack when they released 4 new songs back in 2016 that you can actually access if you download an app called Phantom that possesses this algorithm and does the rejigging of the micro tracks. But what about song lyrics? Or more interestingly, what about books and novels in general? Would you read a book written by artificial intelligence? Now, it turns out that Roald Dahl had this idea long before it could actually be achieved, and in one of his books, Tales of the Unexpected, that includes many different short stories. There is one titled The Great Automatic Grammatizator, a machine able to write prize-winning novels. But is this merely a crazy idea? Well, in terms of prize winning at the moment, most likely, but let me tell you about Botnik, a machine entertainment company that is run by comedy writers. And what they did is they used an algorithm whereby they fed it all of the Harry Potter novels and generated some new clippets of a potential new Harry Potter novel. Some of the passages are potentially passable, such as magic. It was something that Harry Potter thought was very good. Leathery sheets of rain lashed at Harry's ghost as he walked across the grounds to the castle. But other ones were like absolute gems. Ron was standing there and doing a frenzied tap dance. He saw Harry and immediately began to eat Hermione's family. Yeah, I'm sure J.K. Rowling would love that. But then Marcus drops the big bombshell that actually 350 words of the book was actually written by an algorithm, and I'm going to have to say I didn't actually notice. But then 350 words is hardly a novel. So far I've given you pretty much a whirlwind tour through this book, but how can we summarise and look at the key take-home messages of the book? Well, one key take-home is the idea that all the decisions made by an artist are being driven at some level by an algorithmic response of the body to the world around it, whether or not we actually realise it. And the fact that it has this algorithmic basis does mean to some extent it could also be encodable by an algorithm. But one really interesting point that Marcus makes is that our creativity is intimately bound up with our free will. We can live our lives like automata, or we can suddenly make the decision to break out of the routine and create something that is new. However, to program free will contradicts what free will means. Or is free will just an illusion of our underlying algorithmic process? Now, these are all kind of big philosophical questions to ask, and there are no clear answers at the moment. However, currently we definitely seem to view creativity as a human element. It's something we do to kind of assert that we're not actually just machines. And indeed, creativity is also tied up with mortality. It's about leaving something behind that would actually outlast our finite existence. And therefore, is creativity a way that we use to cheat death? A machine isn't going to worry about dying. Or is it? What if a machine did become conscious? How would we ever know? Would its consciousness be anything like ours? And so these are the questions that Marcus asks right at the end of the book. And it comes back kind of full circle because ultimately it will be their paintings, their novels, their creative outputs, and even their mathematics that will give us any chance to kind of crack the machine's code and to feel what it's like to actually be a machine. So with that deep ending, I'm going to leave it here and just say that, this book's pretty interesting, and I really have covered very few examples that are covered in the book. So definitely go check it out if you're interested in learning more. It's just, I don't even know what else to say. I just highly enjoyed it, and I think it's just really interesting to try and see this creative side to artificial intelligence, because as Marcus says, it's the algorithms are being used in all aspects of life these days, and trying to understand the algorithms is so important. And if creativity is one way in which we can do that, then that's kind of cool. And I've run out of things to say. Check out the book if you're interested, and hope you've learned something. And as always, thanks for listening.